I had something completely different on my mind to talk about today, but I was just listening to one of those podcasts from 538, like the polling website, and they made this comment that Elizabeth Warren is more qualified to be president than Bernie Sanders. And to provide a little bit of context, what they were saying is that a lot of people are saying that Elizabeth Warren is more qualified to be president than Bernie Sanders. It's not so much that the hosts are kind of putting in their opinion, they're saying that they've gathered this kind of material. And it's like, what on earth are they talking about? Now, it's like, I'm not even a Democrat, but what I would just say is, how on earth do people kind of come to these conclusions when you actually want to put them up like side by side, resume by resume? It's just sort of like Bernie Sanders has been in the Senate longer. Bernie Sanders has more experience. He has more familiarity with how government works. And before he was in the Senate, he was the representative at large for the state of Vermont. Before that, he was the mayor of Burlington, Vermont. As a mayor, Bernie has held a major level executive role. Did Elizabeth Warren ever do that? No. Was she ever a mayor or a governor? She was not. And furthermore, does she have more years in Congress than Bernie does? No, she does not. Furthermore, does she have more years in politics than Bernie Sanders? No, she does not. Furthermore, was she a Democrat prior to 1996? No, she was not. She switched parties in the 1990s. Elizabeth Warren was a Republican prior to 1996. Bernie Sanders has been consistently following the same platform. Granted, of course, you could be like Bernie's an independent, then a Democrat when it's convenient around election time for the presidency, but he has had roughly the same platform for the duration of his career, going back to the 1950s. So, you have more consistency, more familiarity with government, more political experience, holding a major level executive role. And I understand that Elizabeth Warren is an academic. And I understand that she worked with the Consumer Financial Protections Bureau or something like that. It's not to say that she doesn't have qualifications of her own, but to say that Elizabeth Warren is a more qualified candidate to be president, like to sort of view this that she has a better resume or that she has more experience than Bernie Sanders, is almost just a ludicrous statement. And it's not to say that I just love Bernie's policies or so much. It's more just like, how do people kind of come to these conclusions? What a lot of people are going to kind of do is like, it's probably just going to be Barack Obama syndrome 101 when you sort of start to say that Warren is more qualified than Bernie Sanders. It's going to be like, all right, she's someone who can talk and she's someone who can write. Therefore, that trumps everything else. Because one of the things that we have to deal with is, what are the makings of the president? Like, what are the reasons why you want this person in office? And if someone were just to be like, I like what Elizabeth Warren is saying about her policies more so than Bernie Sanders, okay, I mean, that's one thing. Or if you say that I think that she has the vision and foresight that the president needs more so than Bernie Sanders, like, I prefer that vision, okay, that's something. But to say that she has better qualifications, Bernie by far has the more impressive resume to become a member of the president, to become the president than Elizabeth Warren does. I mean, the only sort of thing that you would say in contrast to a resume like Bernie's is that you don't want someone in his late 70s and you don't want sort of a kind of political insider, because even though Bernie's been an independent in the Senate for a long time, and even though he has quite a different platform than other members of the Senate, I mean, he has been involved in politics for almost the entire duration of his career. And if you view that as some sort of establishment thing and you were like in the need of a political outsider, I could understand that. But guess what? Elizabeth Warren is not a political outsider. Someone who is kind of serving currently in the Senate is not a political outsider. I mean, it's like, she's not someone who just had a bunch of ideas, who started banging the drum, standing on a soapbox in front of the supermarket and got discovered 3 weeks ago. That's kind of the way that I view a political outsider. Someone who was working with Barack Obama, someone who became a senator in 2013, where it's just like, she has her own sort of establishment connections as well. So in terms of that, it's like, you might like to want to say that you like certain issues about Elizabeth Warren a little bit more. She called for the 2% wealth tax on people who have assets of more than $50 million. When I first heard about that, I was just like, that makes everything the libertarians say true. That all the libertarian predictions about taxation is that theft, that's all coming true. Because they're not taxing someone that's going through an exchange or going through, that very brief moment when it goes from one hand to another. Like a sales tax, I can comprehend. An income tax, I can comprehend. I don't like income taxes, but I can comprehend it. But a wealth tax, you're taking what is in people's bank accounts when they are not even using it. I was kind of opposed to that. I know it's not just bank accounts, it's stocks and like the values of their properties and such. And I guess that libertarian fire in me was fighting it for a little while. Then I was just like, one day, I was just like, what am I talking about? You want to tax wealth and assets over $50 million? Go right ahead. And I do mean that. It's like over $50 million. Why? Because it is not really going to hold anybody back financially. You're not going to be pushing any sort of devastating thing on someone. I mean, you do it because of Article 1, Section 8, first of all. Congress does have the right to pass taxes of that nature. Moreover, it is not of any major loss to the people who have more than $50 million in assets. I was just like, all right, that's not really as gross of a deal as many of the libertarians make it out to be. But if you want to just look at policies, that's one thing. If you want to look at vision and foresight, that's one thing. But just to say that Elizabeth Warren has more qualifications than Bernie Sanders, that's not really a statement that I can agree with too easily. I would say, though, in just kind of a concluding note about the wealth tax, it's like, if you're going to be taxing wealth at 2% for people who have more than $50 million, that has to be partnered with a reduction in defense spending. Because a lot of people are just like, the Democrats are talking about how they're opposed to the wars, but then they're also talking about taxing the rich. And of course, yes, they want things like universal health care and universal education and all of these things. The Green New Deal, that's another thing that's going on right now, another talking point issue. But people are just like, well, if you're just going to be taxing the rich, but you're not going to reduce defense spending, the taxes are first and foremost going to be going to these endless wars that Democrats claim to be against, but yet somehow they keep supporting. Why? Because both Republicans and Democrats want to support these endless wars that are going on. And it's the people who are in the third parties and the independents and the people like the libertarians calling for non-interventionism, or the people in the Green Party calling for peace, that are trying to stop these endless wars that are getting American citizens killed and brutalizing other people and the planet. What do you think about Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren? What do you think about anything we've discussed so far? If you have any kind of disagreements, pushback, if you want to challenge me on anything, I would love to hear it. Post something in the comments below and let's talk a little bit more.